a third day since the start of the 2 weeks extension of the phase 1 of the gradual easing of the lockdown, and more concerns over the level of compliance as Nigeria works to curtail the spread of the COVID-19, plus counter orders from state government. And tonight, we dig into the Edo Hospital fraud allegations between the Edo State Governor Obaseki and the administration of the former Governor Adams Oshomole. Controversy rages in the state. Hello everyone and welcome to the program. This is Politics Today live on Channels Television. I'm Sean Kimbalwe in Lagos. Tonight, we dwell on two major issues: the compliance level and the implication on the Nigerian economy of the gradual easing of the lockdown. And also, we will dig into the controversy in Edo State over allegation against the former Governor Adams Oshomole on allegations of fraud of a hospital project. Stay with us, everyone. Tonight on the program, we have some information for you on our political roundup.
The Federal Executive Council has approved the construction of a Faculty of Health Services in the Plateau State University, Bokos, Plateau State. The contract also includes procurement of furniture and equipment. This is one of the 6 memoranda approved at the second virtual meeting of the Council, presided by President Muhammadu Buhari. Other approvals are the provision of 1,200 computers and accessories for the Nigerian Customs, as well as review of the contract for purchase of 2 Boeing 737 full-flight simulators for the Nigerian Aviation Technology Zaria, among others. Hearing has been stalled in the suit filed by a former senator representing Kogi West at the National Assembly, Senator Dino Melaye, who is asking the Federal High Court sitting in Abuja to declare that some sections of the Control of Infectious Diseases Bill 2020, currently being debated on the floor of the House of Representatives of the National Assembly, are draconian, oppressive and authoritarian, and are in breach of its fundamental rights as provided for in the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, 1999, as amended. At the resumed hearing of the suit, lawyer to the House of Representatives, Dr. Kayode Ajulo, informed the court that he is yet to be served with the processes, as he insists that the service is key and fundamental to fair hearing. With the absence of the lawyers to the clerk of the National Assembly, the Inspector General of Police and the Attorney General of the Federation, Justice Ijoma Ojukwu, ordered service to be effected on the Council to the House of Representatives, as she adjourns the suit to the 1st of June for definite hearing. As the world grapples with combating COVID-19, the Borno State government says 40% of its budget is spent on security matters. While the state, through a task force against the spread of coronavirus, is dealing with the pandemic on one hand, the Boko Haram threat is taking its toll on resources available to the government, according to Governor Babagana Zulum. Governor Zulum was speaking when officials of the Borno State chapter of Nigerian Medical Association, NMA, visited him at the government house to submit a health system compendium. The Borno State government has proposed a budget of 134.5 billion naira for the year 2020. 15% of that amounting to 11.6 billion, which is allocated to the health sector.
We have made series of promises to enhance better healthcare system.
And the Nasarawa State Governor Abdullahi Sule has restated his resolve to boost the agriculture sector in the state. He made the remarks during the flag-off of the sale of fertilizers for the 2020 cropping season at the rate of 5,000 naira. The governor also launched the distribution of ruminant feeds and mineral salt licks donated to the state by the federal government.
In his determination to ensure that agricultural potentials of the state are fully harnessed for the overall benefit of our people.
Thank you so much, everyone, for staying with us. Let's get to it. It is the third day since the federal government announced an extension of 2 weeks of the gradual easing of the lockdown in the first phase, which means that the phase 1 of the gradual easing will cease sometime in June. As the Ramadan and the end of Muslim fasting period comes to an end, reading some sort of counter orders from state government on what to do. For example, the federal government has extended the total lockdown in Kano State, but the information coming from there is that the state government is planning to allow religious gathering, which to open in the state, which perhaps is against the policy direction from the federal government. So tonight, we look at some of the issues on compliance and how we can ensure that the COVID-19 is effectively curtailed in Nigeria. Within this next 1 hour and this midweek edition of the program, we'll take you through this ride and, of course, later on the Edo fraud crisis. I've been joined on the program by Senator Magnus Abe, a former lawmaker. He joins us from our Abuja studio. Thank you so much, Senator, for coming on tonight. It's being a torrid one, looking at what disaster this health emergency has caused the world generally. And of course, we narrow down to Nigeria and look at where we have come. When the federal government said they're extending the phase 1 of the gradual ease of the lockdown by 2 weeks, how did that information come to you? Do you think that was perhaps the right decision at a time?
Absolutely, Sheung. First of all, let me start by saying that we all need to remember that this is a country of over 200 million people. And this virus is called the novel coronavirus. It's something that is new to everybody. And if you look at even our legal system, we don't even have the proper legislative foundation to deal with this kind of challenge. So pretty much it's been a learning curve for everybody. And so certain mistakes can be accommodated in this kind of situation. But what I would like Nigerians to remember is to look back at the steps the federal government has taken to contain this pandemic. First of all, the boost that has been given to the NCDC. Secondly, the establishment of the Presidential Task Force under the Secretary to Government, which has been operating at the very highest levels of government and involving the president almost daily in what has been going on in the country. I think if we look at the Nigerian response, which has been commended across the world, and the effect and impact that this has had, there is nobody in this country who will not be proud of the effort that we have made so far. I think the directive of the federal government is so that things don't just spiral out of control. Because if you look at the way the public has been responding to some of the contributions that individuals and businesses are being asked to make, for example, wearing of face masks in public, maintaining social distance, even in the conduct of businesses that have been allowed to open, restriction of social gatherings, even the curfew, you will find out that a lot of Nigerians are doing their part, but a lot are also not doing what they should be doing. There are even people going around trying to deceive people, oh, there's nothing like coronavirus, oh, government people just want to eat money, and all sorts of dangerous propaganda that, in my opinion, is meant to undermine the efforts of the federal government. But substantially, I think we can, at this point, nobody knows what tomorrow may bring, because this is still very much a changing situation. But I think at this point, we can give the federal government a pat on the back and give ourselves as Nigerians also a pat on the back. I think we've done relatively well. The kind of explosion that people expected to see in Africa, particularly in Nigeria, so far I don't think we have seen it. And by the grace of God, we will not see it if we continue on the present trajectory. So I think so far so good. It's going well, in my opinion.
So, well, the fear of the federal government, in essence, was that much of the guidelines are not being followed, and that's the reason why the extension, and there was warning on this issue. But largely, we've seen some counter directives. The president had a meeting with the representatives of the governors forum, some governors, on the fact that there needs to be synergy between the state and the federal government. But it looks so much that we've not been seeing, in some states, we've not seen that happen. There's also a school of thought that says there should be a singular, a central directive, the direction on how to curtail this disease. But do you fear that there's being some disparity in the voices at the federative unit and at the center?
Yeah, sure, that is correct. We've seen cases and instances like that which are pretty much in the public domain. There have been some spats between the NCDC and some state governments, and there have been some states that have come out to behave as if they are a separate federation in their own right. But like I said from the beginning, this is pretty much a learning curve for everybody. This thing is new to everybody. And we don't even have the proper legislative foundation. The laws that we have dealing with issues like this are totally antiquated. They're old, and they have no bearing to our present realities. So the government has been very much, how would I put it now? It's been one step at a time, checking what works, what is possible, what is not possible. And they've done very, very well, given the limited circumstances within which they are operating. The only other option that we would have had is for the president to declare a state of emergency across the country and then use fiat and force to enforce the federal will across the country, even on states that are reluctant to cooperate. But so far, I do not see that there is any situation in the country right now that demands that kind of extreme measure. We're not doing badly. There are some states that have not behaved well, but I think that the current policy of engagement, which the government is adopting to deal with some of those challenges, I think it will work pretty well given the circumstances. And something else I would like to say, Sheung, is that all of us talk as if COVID is a problem for the next 1 week or 1 month, or by June it will be over, or by September it will be over. I think we need to think in the long term. This is something that could go on for pretty much longer than we are anticipating. We all need to remember that this pandemic started with one individual in Wuhan, China, and today it is a threat to me here in Abuja and a threat to you there in Lagos. So what we must all remember, that even if it is one person in Borno that is COVID positive, that one person is a threat to me here and a threat to the man in Wuhan. That's just the way the world is interconnected at this point. And within our national boundaries, it's going to be very difficult if we don't work together for us to be able to contain the spread of this pandemic. So far, with the restriction on activities, the restriction on interstate movements and all that, I think the government has done very well to keep this problem contained within the areas where it has been most endemic. And I think that if we continue to support the president, support the NCDC, and cooperate amongst ourselves as citizens of this great country, I am pretty confident that just the way we defeated Ebola, I think at the end of the day, we'll be able to give ourselves a pat on the back on how we are able to handle this. But it's still a long road ahead. We still have to deal with the challenges of educational institutions. The government, like you mentioned, is under a lot of pressure from religious bodies and all that. And these are very, very powerful and influential groups within our socio-economic polity. And then there's also, of course, the economic challenges that COVID is bringing, which also has to be addressed, which is part of why the government relaxed the lockdown within the period to allow certain economic activities to resume. So all in all, I think Nigeria is doing very, very well. I would like to commend the president for his leadership and commend the Presidential Task Force for the much they have been able to do, given, like I said, that this is a learning curve for everybody. But my happiness is that the kind of catastrophe that people expected to see in Africa, particularly in Nigeria. So far, we have been able to avert it. And if we continue to behave responsibly, cooperate with one another, support the NCDC and the federal government, I believe that we will be able to flatten the curve sooner than we think, and a lot of these restrictions can be lifted.
For example, in Kano State, we understand that the government is planning to allow religious congregation to begin. Also, in your own state, Rivers State, we saw what has happened in the action of the state governor, for example, who ordered the demolition of some hotels. What do you make of the actions of some of the governors and perhaps their approach?
You know, Shehu, I really would not like to be overly, how would I put it, draconian in my criticism of anybody at this point. I think some of the governors have overreacted, some have underreacted, but this is pretty much a problem that is still ongoing. And my advice has always been that as much as possible, we should remember that we're fighting a virus and that we all need to work together. My feelings about the demolition of a property in Rivers State, I have made it public. I don't approve of it. I think it was excessive and an overreaction. But like I said, in this kind of situation, anybody can make a mistake because the entire thing is new. And people are reacting in different ways and learning as we move on. I think the important thing is that where we have made mistakes, we should be able to correct them and then be able to move forward in a manner that makes it possible for all of us to participate completely in the war against this virus. So if in the middle of the war, we go back to begin to fight other wars with each other at this point, I don't think that will augur well. I also didn't want to comment on the situation in Kano. As you know, Kano is easily one of the most populous cities in this country, and it is also one of the flashpoints that people had expected that we will be having challenges, and not surprisingly, we are having them. But the federal government has stepped in to work with the Kano State government to bring the situation under control. My advice to the Kano State government at this point is to work with the NCDC and work with the experts. As much as possible, states should put their experts in front. Let the politicians not be the ones deciding every policy that has to do with the war against the coronavirus. If you look at the federal level, you see the chairman of the task force, he takes his cue from the professionals and the experts. They are the ones who actually look at what is going on and give scientific advice as to how this is to be tackled. And the federal government acts based on that scientific advice. And that is very, very commendable. This is a scientific issue. Nobody can see the virus. It's only the scientists that are using their microscopes and however they are seeing it to see the virus. So we need to allow those people who can see it and who can understand it to advise us on how to go about it. I think that if politicians we use our own common sense to begin to attack the virus, we may inadvertently make mistakes that will put our people at greater risk. And this advice is meant for everybody. So all across the country, I will advise all politicians to allow the scientists, the experts that they themselves have appointed to be involved in what they are doing and to advise them. You might have a commissioner for health or a minister for health, but he may not be an expert in this particular field. If you look at the national level, yes, the Minister of Health is involved, he's in front, he's very proactive, but you have professionals, you know, who are brought in to advise specifically on this matter because of the extent of their knowledge, their interaction with other experts across the world, because it's a situation that is changing rapidly. We can hear something today, tomorrow World Health Organization will say they got a new information from another country that this is not the way to go, and we need to make adjustments. And it is these professionals that have access to all that information, and they should be involved. if I don't want to say that I have heard that the Kano State government has given such a directive, as you said, Shehu. That matter is in the social media. I've not heard any official statement from the Kano State government in that regard. I have not heard. So I wouldn't like to speculate on that. But what I would advise the Kano State government is that they should talk to their experts, because essentially this is a matter of life and death. And so it's not something that we'll use sentiments or political astuteness to tackle. So I think we're doing fine, but there's room for improvement. And because of the very loose legislative foundation on which we are operating at this time, it is possible that there are going to be some mistakes. But we should overcome them and move forward.
Senator Magnus Abe, former lawmaker, thank you so much indeed for your time tonight on the program.
Thank you, Shehu.
We'll take a break, and when we return, we'll talk about the Edo Hospital fraud allegations and the issues raised, controversy raised in Edo State ahead of the governorship election, which comes later in the year. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back, everyone. Welcome back, everyone. Crisis is brewing yet again in Edo State, perhaps because of the forthcoming elections. That may be a big signal, isn't it? The Edo governor, Mr. Godwin Obaseki, says he's not happy that the Edo Specialist Hospital, which costs so much of taxpayers' money, cannot be put to good use in fighting coronavirus pandemic currently ravaging the world. Mr. Obaseki was speaking after receiving a report on the hospital by the Judicial Commission of Inquiry set up in January to investigate all the contracts involved in the construction of the facility and the medical supplies. He insisted that the inquiry had been set up before the advent of COVID-19 and is not punitive, noting that anyone found culpable by the probe, irrespective of position, will face the law. Take a listen to Governor Obaseki.
When we instituted this panel to investigate and find out why and the hospital, the specialist hospital, which was built with so much of taxpayers' monies, could not be put into full operation. We did not know at that time that the world would be faced with a public health pandemic, COVID-19, as we have today. And this rather unfortunate pandemic has put to our healthcare system to test. Some people who had the opportunity to commence the process of rebuilding some of these institutions, rather than took measures and steps to further destroy an already weak system. If we find anybody or any groups of persons, no matter how highly placed, to have been indicted or have cause to be called to account for their actions, this government will stop at no, it will not stop until it gets to the bottom of the matter. We will not stop until everybody who has something to explain or has resources of government to refund, because this hospital or these projects were built or done with taxpayers' funds. As the government, we will make sure that anybody who has questions to answer will be called upon to answer, no matter how highly placed. And if there are resources of government that need to be returned to government, we'll not stop at any length to make sure and those resources are returned to government.
Well, the former governor, Adams Oshiomhole, whose administration handled the project, told me in an interview last year about this project some of his thoughts on the issues raised on the reason why the hospital did not function 3 years or more after it was launched by President Muhammadu Buhari. This is the side of the story of Mr. Adams Oshiomhole.
Built what I call a 5-star hospital. And I deliberately for health. And we got a professor of medicine, University of Benin, a lady, Mrs. Edigie, to superintend over the procurement process and ensuring that we bring state-of-the-art equipment to that hospital. We built the hospital with a taxpayers' money, and consistent with my policy, we gave the contract to Vamed Nigeria Limited. Vamed is very well known international hospital equipment manufacturers. They operate not only in Nigeria, they operate in many African countries. They are known to have the largest hospital in Austria. And for me, we will not give anything less than the best. And we placed order for them to supply this equipment, which they did. And with time, they procured the equipment. And the hospital has been furnished. I paid 75% of the total value before I left government. All I expected my successor to do was to pay the balance. Yes, prices have changed. All of this can be negotiated. And this hospital was locked. I take a newspaper every day. I see my political opponent arguing that there is nothing in the hospital. And this is a hospital that President Muhammadu Buhari came to commission about 1 week before the end of my tenure. And from the equipment that were already delivered, he was so impressed. He was very impressed. And I told her the choice I had to make was between building what you might call ultra-modern state house, or rather building ultra-modern, go floor by floor, see the kind of equipment that are there, get those who know what those equipment are meant for to explain to you the use of those equipment. You will be impressed about what we did. And this hospital was closed for 2 years. I keep speaking to the governor. The only way, because as the Europeans will say, or the British, the sweetness of the pudding is in the eating. If it's convenient for PDP to be writing that there is nothing in the hospital, the best way to answer them is to open the hospital for business. When the governor refused to open the hospital, after I have complained to Dangote, who is our mutual friend, I decided, I asked the company to do a documentation on each of the equipment that are in the hospital. And I placed it on various networks, including channels, about 25 minutes documentary. When people saw that, the public opinion changed. And the governor came under pressure. Why will you lock this hospital with this kind of facilities? Now, rather than opening this hospital up in obedience to the public outcry, they decided to set up an inquiry. And I'm going to give you a copy of the findings of the inquiry. Now, who set up this inquiry? This inquiry was set up by a speaker who has grievances arising from the fact that he lost nomination to a sitting member of the House of Representatives, Honorable Peter Akpatasi, who, thanks to God, is today the deputy leader of the House. And so, based on his own bitterness, he was encouraged by government to set up a panel to investigate the construction as well as the procurement process. And they removed all the documents from the Ministry of Health to give the impression as if the construction was a verbal transaction.
Well, you heard him there. So let's talk about this, everyone. It's causing a lot of trouble. There are protests on the streets of Edo by concerned individuals about the probe on these hospital projects. I have joining me tonight, the panel to discuss is a former commissioner in the Oshomole administration who was in charge of information, Mr. Kasim Afegbua. He joins us from our Abuja studio. And to speak for the Obaseki government is Mr. Mwante Adaze. He's an advisor to Governor Obaseki. He joins us via Skype. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for coming on tonight. Let me begin by asking you, Mr. Adaze, the government of the Obaseki-led administration has set up this committee and they have come out with a white paper saying that the administration of the Oshomole administration is indicted in this. In just about a few seconds, what exactly are these indictments?
Basically, it was a commission of inquiry set up to look at those allegations that were made by the opposition, particularly the PDP. You know, we had a series of protests. And of course, the commission came up with an 8-point recommendation, one of which was that the process itself was flawed by all forms of, fraud, because the law is very clear. Section 47 of the procurement law requires 25% payment of mobilization, but Oshomole had to pay 75%. Unfortunately, that money was paid, yet the equipment were not delivered. Unfortunately, when Mr. President came to commission that hospital towards the end of Oshomole's government, what they did was they went to Lagos, they hired some hospital equipment, put them there, deceived Mr. President. After the president left, still within Oshomole's government, that hospital was under lock and key. So when I hear the former governor talk about the place was locked, he locked that hospital. When the governor came, the hospital was open, and we discovered that there were no equipment, because when they hired this equipment from Lagos, before Oshomole left government, they returned this equipment. And there's no way the governor can conceal such a public trust, because health is at the core of every government policy. So this idea of concealment was not part and parcel of the social contract Golden Obaseki has with the other people. So that there's an inquiry now that has brought out to the fore the facts as they are. So you have a case of...
Let's get it clear, Mr. Mwante Adaze. Fundamentally, just apologies, we need to be succinct and straight to the point, because we have some of these allegations, and I like the two sides on the divide tonight to be able to give Nigerians a clarity and explanation of some sort on what is happening exactly. So fundamentally, what you're saying is that the paper or the inquiry indicted the Oshomole administration for giving a mobilization of 75% as against 25%. That's the position, isn't it?
That is one. And the fact that at the time the president was invited to come and commission, the hospital was not complete. Do you commission what is not complete without an equipment? Without equipment in the hospital, what makes a hospital?
So you also said, sorry, so that before, please, apologies, so that Mr. Afegbua can react. I just wanted to make it clear so that he will know what exactly to react to. So you are saying that hospital, when it was opened by the Obaseki government, it was empty, no equipment in there.
Completely empty. We had some hospital beds, but the main equipment, because it's a specialist hospital, the main equipment were yet to be delivered. And even they admitted that they had issues with Forex, but we are talking of a contract, a situation where you find a governor holding brief for a contractor, trying to explain that there was drop in dollar. And unfortunately, until 2018, none of these equipment were delivered. And even as we speak, most of these equipment have not been delivered.
All right, so you said, just a moment again, Mr. Adaze, so don't let us muddle the issues. So you said they borrowed equipment. Do you know where these equipments were borrowed from?
Of course, from Lagos. There's a company, I don't want to mention the name of the company, some were even acquired from Stella Obasanjo Hospital. So you find that the hospital was not ready at the time Mr. President commissioned this hospital. So it was a clear case of fraud, advance fee fraud. 75% was paid. These equipment were not delivered, but they went to hire equipment from Lagos.
Mr. Adaze, let's allow Mr. Afegbua to come into the conversation. So, Mr. Afegbua, please react to what Mr. Adaze said about these indictments.
Well, you see, I've just been listening to him and laughing out my heart. Not for any reason, but for the fact that Adaise was an outsider in government. He didn't know what transpired. He's just been sent an errand to come and defend the government. But again, as a lawyer, I expect him to speak to facts of the matter. And what are these facts? You were talking about hospital that was commissioned and it was put under lock and key. When you opened it, you found it empty. Then you now locked it. Yet, the same government on September 18, 2018, wrote a letter of commendation to VAMED for having fulfilled the terms of the contract of supply of equipment to that hospital and praying that they should please help to train some of the personnel that will handle this sophisticated equipment. But to look at an Adaise telling us that as of 2018, nothing was done, I find it very, very curious and very laughable. The point is, the central hospital, when we were approving that contract in 2016 as a government, as an ESCO, Governor Godwin Obaseki was then our colleague. He was part and parcel of ESCO. He also was one of those who gave advice that it would be better for us to have a 75% advance payment so that we can, beat we can beat the fluctuations that was evidently going to happen as a result of our Naira devaluation. We gave that contract, that at that period, dollar was 198. Barely 5 months after then, dollar rose to 360, and in some cases 400 naira to $1. So to that extent, the company were not able to, get the required foreign exchange to carry out this contract. But as at the time they now carried out the contract, by September 18, 2018, they delivered up to 75% as agreed in the terms of the contract. And the Obaseki administration wrote a letter of commendation to VAMED saying that you have done your bit. Now, for the Obaseki administration to pay the remaining 25% so that the company can conclude on the equipment that are left, it has refused to do so. So I just see this as a sheer political witch hunt by somebody who served in the same government with us, who was our colleague, who also voted in the ESCO, who was part and parcel of the ESCO, who knew everything. When Buhari was commissioned, he was standing at the back of Comrade Adams Oshomole at that commission, if you watch the video. And so for him to come and say that the commission an empty hospital is not only laughable, ridiculous, but I think it's very outlandish.
Okay, we take a break now. But when we come back, we'll talk more about some of the items on the inquiry report and the issues on the allegations of procurement breach in Edo State. Join us again, everyone. Thank you so much, everyone, for staying with us. We're talking about the allegation of fraud over the Edo Specialist Hospital in Benin City. My partner tonight, Mr. Kasim Afegbua, a former commissioner in Edo State under the Oshomole administration, and Mr. Adaise Emwanta is an advisor to Governor Obaseki. We'll trying to get some clarity. Before I come back to you, Mr. Emwanta, Mr. Afegbua, react to what the allegation of that committee has also reiterated by Mr. Emwanta, saying that the administration of the Oshomole exceeded the 25% mobilization fees for contractors as captured in the procurement law in Edo State, the section 47 of the procurement law in Edo State.
Well, thank you very much, Sheung. You see, the ESCO took a decision as a body, following advices from people like Godwin Obaseki and the Tenders Board, chairman by one of Obaseki's managing director of the Edo Geographical Information System, Information System, GIS, presently Frank Ewawan, that in view of the fact that these items are state-of-the-art items, equipment, that it would be advisable for us to pay 75% upfront so that the company will not default in terms of manufacturing this equipment. These are not items you can buy across the counter. These are items that have to be manufactured to suit specification under the supervision of the Commissioner for Health, who is a professor of medicine from the University of Benin. That is one. Secondly, the Section 47 he quoted also has a proviso, because in Edo State's procurement law also provides that in the event that you are going to pay more than 20% or 25%, there has to be a written request from the company, number one, and there has to be a bank guarantee or insurance bond to ensure that when you pay such amount of money, the contractor will not run away from site. That is provided in the law. So what we did as an ESCO, as a body, for which Governor Obaseki was part and parcel, was not out of place. But for you to now set up a commission of inquiry, indicting us, means that Obaseki is also indicted. So if he wants to try us, he should also remove his immunity and join us in the dock so that we can be tried together for indictment. That is another. Thirdly, you see, it is not good for you to play politics with issues that are so obvious. The Edo Central Hospital, they are the one calling it specialist hospital. If you say it was under lock and key and you refuse to use it, how come you appointed a consultant from Delta State who is presently running the place, but because the equipment are so sophisticated, rather than give personnel that will be trained by this company, they refuse because they just want to carry out sheer blackmail. So, in essence, that hospital is 75% ready in terms of equipment, 100% ready in terms of the structure, and ready to move to business. But the Obaseki administration, for out of wickedness and sheer brigandage, decided to just keep it under lock and key and put a consultant there who is just pretending.
So let's allow Mr. Adaze to respond to you, Mr. Afegbua.
Only 3 days ago, listen.
Hold on, Mr. Afegbua, because we need to balance the timing issue also. Mr. Adaze, react to what Mr. Afegbua said on the issue, and also Mr. Shomale, in that interview we played earlier, also queried the reason why the hospital has been under lock and key. Your reaction?
It's quite unfortunate because when you talk of a hospital, you don't talk of 75%. If you were paid 75%, it means that your equipment that has been paid for against the procurement law, which was 75% that they received, was also to be 100% delivered. You don't talk of, because you're talking of lives here. And what is even more important is the fact that this equipment, Kasim has considered that it is 75% of what was supposed to be 100% equipment that was delivered. Unfortunately, they talk of ESCO. The buck stops at the table of the governor. Oshomole was the governor at the material time. Obaseki was a member of ESCO in an advisory capacity. If as governor of the state, the government was indicted, the buck stops at his table. It was Harry Truman, the former American president, that says the buck stops here. Adams Oshomole was the person who gave that contract to a middle woman. Her name is Golda. Edo people, it's adult public affairs, that woman fixed that money, all this talk of foreign exchange and the rest, all those are cock and bull story. The inquiry has brought out the truth. The procurement law was breached, this contract was not completed, and people will be made to refund the monies that they collected. If Mr. President was invited to commission the project, as Kasim has said, that was not complete, why commission a project that is not up to 75% complete? Even the time they are now talking of 75% is 2018. At the time the hospital was commissioned, there was no equipment. They had equipment. There's no way the governor can be part of a fraud.
You've not, what I was asking earlier, part of the reaction I was asking is why hospital was under lock and key for over 2 years. Would you react to that?
It was Oshomole that locked that equipment, locked the hospital because the equipment were not supplied. Kasim said that the equipment were brought in 2018 for an hospital that was commissioned in 2016, and it was even 75% of those equipment. When 75%
was there a written recommendation letter? Sorry, was there, as alleged by Mr. Afegbua, was there a written recommendation letter to VAME, the company involved, by the Obaseki government?
That claim is wishful thinking, because Kasim is just talking as one of those persons that, of course, he belongs to the same ethnic group with Oshomole, and he would defend him even as a PDP member. But I am speaking from a standpoint of fact. If a hospital that was commissioned in 2016, you are now talking of 2018, you are bringing 75% of the equipment, it therefore means there was a fraud. And that is what this inquiry has,
So quickly also,
went to talk to
so quickly, Mr. Adeze, also react to the fact that Mr. Afegbua is claiming that if there is any indictment, that the governor should also be joined in that indictment.
It does not even make any sense because the approval for payment was made by Adams Aliyu Oshomole as governor of Edo State. If there's any charge from the recommendations, it is a man who gave that approval. And there was no way ESCO would approve something that was against the law. A permanent secretary from the findings of the commission actually recommended that the law says 25%. And Oshomole, using his fiat, approved the payment of 75% to his girlfriend, Golda. And that lady fixed the money. That money was placed under fixed deposit for years. And of course, this inquiry has brought out the facts. What are they afraid of? If Oshomole is saying that is innocent, he should come to equity with clean hands.
All right, let's hear from Mr. Afegbua on some of the issues that you have raised. Mr. Afegbua, your time to react to some of the things that you said.
So, I think I can tolerate the naivety of Ewanta, but I can't excuse his ignorance, very crass ignorance about the operations of government. A governor of a state has no power to approve any contract that is more than 100 million. No government in Edo State, no governor in Edo State has the power. When a contract that exceeds 100 million gets to the ESCO, memos are prepared and they are served to all commissioners. They study them and they make their inputs. When it is time for discussion, the inputs are presented. And once there is a vote and approval, it goes to the cabinet office of the ESCO. It is not the governor's table. This is where the ignorance comes in. Then from there, a memo, an extract of that ESCO will be given as a condition precedent to the award of such contract. A governor has no power to approve contract exceeding 100 million. That's an ignorance on the part of a one-task. Secondly, you see, when you mention people's name, you have to be careful because some of these things could be very libelous, in a way. You are mentioning a lady's name, Golda. The company that we gave contract to is VAMED. And the Edo State government under Godwin Obaseki issued a letter of commendation to VAMED, certifying the equipment they have supplied to meet the 75% paid for that job. It is the responsibility of the state government under Obaseki to pay the remaining 25% and supply the other equipment. And he's talking about 100%. I think he's having problem with understanding the tenor of my presentation.
So, Mr. Afegbua, would you also react to... So, Mr. Afegbua, would you also react to the fact that at the end of the day, it comes to the fact that the buck stops at the table of the governor?
No, which buck? I've just told you the scenario and the situation and the operative, situation in award of contract. A governor has no power in Edo State, I don't know of any other state, to award contract beyond 100 million. But once it is beyond 100 million, if it becomes an ESCO decision, that is the ESCO position, they're taking having collected inputs from all members of the ESCO. And once that decision has been taken, that document, that extract, becomes the position of the state government. It is not Adams Aliyu Oshomole as the client. It is Edo State government as the client, giving contract to VAMED as a company that supplies hospital equipment. That is the procedure.
Yeah.
And that procedure
we need to close the program now. Let's allow Mr. Mwanta a 20 seconds closing remark. Mr. Mwanta, your 20-second closing remark.
It's quite unfortunate that Kasim has come to national TV to give tales because governors have security votes. And of course, we know the figures over 100 million. So for security contracts, you can actually give as much as you can because health and security are connected. But of course, in the days ahead, the Edo State Ministry of Justice will start the process of prosecuting Adams Oshomole for the crimes he has committed against Edo people. and for the fraud he committed to Nigerians when he invited the president to commission an uncompleted projects. He's not above the law.
I must sincerely thank both of you for coming tonight. Mr. Kasim Afegbua.
Also note that in this same event, you didn't invite Governor Adams Oshomole to come and testify. You didn't invite him at all. You only set up your commission. You gave him a verdict, and you are shaving his head in his absence. No fair hearing, which is a requirement under our laws.
We need to leave it at that.
But you know, they were working from answer to question, and now we have seen their traces.
Mr. Kasim Afegbua, thank you so much. And Mr. Mwanta Adaze, thank you, gentlemen, for coming tonight. Well, that's our show for tonight, everyone. Many thanks for watching. I'm Sean Kimbale. Bye for now.